The Grand Sterling Hotel ballroom was packed that Friday evening, and every important name in Chicago had come for the same reason, to celebrate a love story. Julia Torres was wearing a burgundy dress she had borrowed from a colleague at the hospital, and she was standing near the balcony door with ice-cold hands. She had been searching for the courage to tell the truth for almost an hour. Ryan Slade had just announced a donation that left the entire room breathless, and the crowd was still on its feet applauding. Everything was going to be fine. Julia managed to believe that for almost a full minute. Then a woman in a silver dress walked up to the microphone, took it with a calmness that sent a chill through the room, and smiled toward the tables. "I am sorry to interrupt the party," said Cecilia Chandler. "But before you keep applauding, I think everyone here deserves to know that this love story is not real." A murmur swept through the room like a cold current of air. Ryan went completely still. Julia felt the floor shift beneath her heels because she knew exactly what was coming, and she knew it was already too late to stop it. 200 people turned to look at her at the same time. To understand how the two of them ended up in that ballroom, you have to go back 3 months to a poker night at a bar in Wicker Park where a man said something out loud that would end up costing him everything. The bar had worn wooden tables, dim amber lighting tonight, and a ceiling fan turning slowly above the game. Simon was dealing the cards with that habit of his never letting a subject rest. "All right, Ryan," he said. "You have dated half of Chicago, and you have never told us what you actually look for in someone." Ryan took a sip of his whiskey and shrugged. "I don't know, man. Smart, good-looking. Someone who has built something for herself." "That tells me nothing," said Simon. "Be specific. Tall, short, older, younger, career, woman, whatever." Nick Rivera, Ryan's business partner, was leaning back in his chair across the table without saying a word. He had been quiet most of the night. Nick was the kind of man who watches first and speaks last. The two of them had built their financial technology company from nothing, starting with 2 borrowed laptops and a rented office in River North. They had been friends for 12 years. "I think what Simon is really asking," said Nick slowly, "is whether there is something you would never be able to get past in a person." Ryan laughed. The whiskey had him looser than usual and less careful. "You want me to be honest?" "Always," said Nick. His voice was steady, but there was something sharp behind his eyes. Ryan did not notice. "Fine. I know exactly what I don't want. I would never fall for a service worker. A woman in a uniform, no degree, no last name, that opens any doors. That is just not my world. It never has been, and it never will be." The words hung over the table like smoke. Simon raised his eyebrows. Nick did not move a single inch. "Never?" asked Nick. Ryan realized too late that he had crossed a line, but his pride would not let him take it back. "It is just a preference. Nothing personal. We all have our preferences, don't we?" "Of course," said Nick quietly. His jaw was tight. Ryan could see the anger there, barely beneath the surface. "Hey, Nick, I didn't mean it like that." "Let us make things interesting," Nick interrupted. His voice had shifted. It was colder now. "What do you mean by interesting?" asked Ryan. "A bet," said Nick. "I will bet you $50,000 that you fall in love with the next woman I introduce you to." Simon let out a long, low whistle. "That is a serious amount of money." Ryan laughed again. He thought he understood exactly what Nick was doing. Introduce him to some woman in a uniform, embarrass him, and teach him a lesson. It seemed like the easiest money of his life. "You are going to introduce me to someone, and you think I am going to fall in love? Nick, come on. I don't fall in love, I date people. That is not the same thing." "So you are afraid?" asked Nick. "I am not afraid of anything," said Ryan. "Then we have a deal." Ryan reached his hand across the table. "This is going to be the easiest money I have ever made in my life." They shook on it. Nick smiled, but it was not the smile of a friend. It was the smile of a man who already knows something the other person has not figured out yet. That should have been the first warning. Ryan was too sure of himself to see it. What Ryan also failed to see that night was the look on Nick's face when they walked out to the sidewalk to wait for their cars. Nick stood looking at the wet asphalt, hands in his pockets, his throat tight. He was thinking about his mother. His mother had cleaned houses on the North Shore for 18 years, Monday through Saturday, so that he could finish his degree. Ryan knew that perfectly well. Ryan had eaten dinner at that house. He had enjoyed her home cooking at Christmas and had hugged her on the day of her funeral. And that same night, with a drink in his hand, Ryan had mocked women just like her without even remembering she had existed. "One more thing," said Nick when his car arrived. "If you lose, you will not be paying me." "Then who?" asked Ryan, still smiling. "You will find out," said Nick, and he got in without saying goodbye. Ryan stood alone on the sidewalk, with the sound of traffic and the smell of the rain-soaked street, feeling, for the first time that evening, that something did not add up. He brushed it off the way you brush away a fly. He had been winning at everything he set his mind to for years. 3 weeks later, he would be standing at the entrance of Chicago General Hospital, watching a woman kneel over the chest of a stranger, and his entire life would split in two without him even knowing it. 3 weeks later, Ryan Slade was standing in front of the entrance to Chicago General Hospital, feeling completely out of place. He hated hospitals. They smelled like antiseptic and medication, and the quiet fear of people waiting for news. Nick had told him to be there at 8 in the evening, that he was going to meet the foundation dinner consultant, and not to be late. Ryan checked his watch. 8:10. The so-called consultant was the one running behind. He was about to call Nick to complain when he heard shouting near the entrance gate. A man in his early 70s grabbed his chest, turned the color of ash, took 2 unsteady steps and went down hard onto the sidewalk. The people around him froze. That is always what happens in those moments. And then a woman pushed through the crowd. She was wearing a paramedic uniform with reflective stripes on the sleeves, and she did not hesitate for even a second before dropping to her knees beside the man. "Step back and give him air," she said. Her voice came out clear and firm, like an order nobody was going to question. "Sir, can you hear me? I am a paramedic and I am going to help you." Ryan watched her check for a pulse at the man's neck, tilt his head back, look inside his mouth. Her hands moved with absolute certainty. "No pulse," she said. She crossed both hands over the man's chest and began compressions, counting out loud, leaning her full body weight behind each one. "You in the blue shirt," she called out without breaking her count. "Go into the ER, ask for a gurney and a defibrillator, and tell them we have a cardiac arrest. Run." The young man ran. She kept working. Ryan had never seen anyone operate like that. No performance, no hesitation, sweating under the orange glow of the streetlights. 2 EMTs and an attending physician arrived. She gave them a complete handoff in 3 sentences. The time of collapse, the minutes of CPR, exactly what she had found. They rushed the man inside. The woman stood up, brushed her knees off, and let out a long, slow breath. That was when Ryan really looked at her. She was beautiful, not in the polished way he was used to seeing on the arm of someone at a gala, but in a way that was completely real. Her hair pulled back in a braid, no makeup, sharp, intelligent eyes, her uniform dusty from the sidewalk. She was exactly the kind of woman he had sworn he would never look at twice. And Ryan felt something shift in his chest. Irritation, he told himself, nothing more than irritation because Nick was playing games with him. The woman turned and nearly walked right into him. "Excuse me," she said, polite and completely indifferent. "What you just did was extraordinary," said Ryan, and he gave her the smile that almost always worked. "It is my job," she replied, and stepped around him to keep walking. "Wait," said Ryan. "Are you Julia Torres?" She stopped and looked him over with those sharp eyes. "Who is asking?" "Ryan Slade. I think we have a meeting." Something settled in her expression. "Oh, the dinner. I was heading there when that man collapsed." "He was lucky you were here," said Ryan. "Luck had nothing to do with it. I work here." "Right, of course." Ryan felt genuinely off balance, which almost never happened to him. "Can we grab a coffee and talk through the event?" "I have 20 minutes, said Julia. "There is a diner across the street." and she walked toward the crosswalk without waiting for him. Ryan followed her with a brand new sensation. The feeling of having lost the first hand of a game no one had explained the rules to. The diner was nearly empty at that hour. Julia ordered black coffee. Ryan ordered the same, even though he always took his with cream. He could adapt. "So," she said, sitting down and looking at him directly, "Nick tells me your company wants to fund a free clinic." "That is right. We are planning a fundraising gala to raise the money. Nick says you are the person to tell us what the community actually needs." "What the community actually needs," said Julia slowly, "is for people with money to stop treating charity like a photo opportunity." Ryan blinked. "Excuse me? I have seen 200 dinners just like the one you want to throw. The donors sign the check, take the photo, feel like good people for the rest of the year, drive back to Lincoln Park, and in my neighborhood, nothing changes. Not one thing." "That is a pretty bitter way to look at it," said Ryan. "It is a realistic way," she corrected him. "If you actually want to help, you need to commit for years. Not for one evening." Ryan leaned back in his chair. He was used to people agreeing with him, congratulating him, thanking him. This woman was doing none of those things, and for some reason that made her more interesting. "And if I told you I am serious, I would tell you to prove it," Julia answered, and she stood up. "I have to get back. Send me what you have planned by email, and I will tell you if it is worth my time." "Your time," said Ryan. "I am the one putting up the money." "Your money," she finished. "But money without understanding is just a bandage, Mr. Slade. If you want to do this right, you are going to need a lot more than a checkbook." And she walked out. Ryan sat there with his coffee going cold in front of him, unable to close his mouth. Nobody talked to him like that. Nobody. His phone buzzed. A message from Nick. "Did you meet Ms. Torres yet?" Ryan typed back fast. "Your consultant has no filter." The reply came in seconds. "My consultant is brilliant, and your money means exactly nothing to her. Good luck." Ryan stared at the screen for a long time, then he smiled. "All right, Nick," he said out loud in the quiet diner. "Let us play." That week, Ryan did something he had not done in years. He did his own research. Not through his assistant. He did it himself, sitting at his desk in the Loop until well past midnight. Julia Torres, 29 years old. Emergency medical technician, 8 years of service, born and raised on the south side of Chicago in Pullman. Oldest daughter of Elena Torres, a woman who cleaned downtown offices through the night and sold homemade tamales at the neighborhood market every morning to raise 3 children on her own. 2 younger brothers, both college graduates because of her. Julia had entered the paramedic program at 19 and graduated at the top of her class. Then came the overnight shifts, the aging ambulances, the years of learning how to decide in 30 seconds what could mean life or death. And for the past 6 years, every single Saturday, she had been running a free clinic out of a borrowed church hall with a doctor and 2 nurses. She was exactly the kind of person Ryan had always avoided. Too serious, too driven by something bigger than herself, too real. And he could not stop thinking about her. He told himself it was about the bet, about winning, about not giving Nick the satisfaction. Deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. He sent her the full event plan by email. She responded with 4 pages of detailed critiques. It was brutal. And she was right about every single point. Ryan read it twice, then rebuilt the entire plan from scratch. He sent it back. She replied with 3 words. Better. Still needs work. He rebuilt it again, this time asking questions instead of making assumptions. She replied differently. This could actually help someone. Let us meet to go over the details. Ryan felt a surge of satisfaction he had not experienced since closing his first funding round. They met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Julia arrived in jeans and a sweatshirt, her natural curls loose around her face. She looked tired. She also looked stunning. "You actually took my note seriously," she said, pulling up the plan on her tablet. "You were right about everything," Ryan admitted. "My first version was all surface. Not many people own it when they are wrong. "I am not like most people," he said. "I am starting to see that," she replied, and for the first time he caught something close to a smile. They stayed 3 hours going through details. Where exactly should the clinic be located, and why that block and not the one 2 streets over? Which days of the week would actually serve people because Saturday is the day that matters most? Why the pharmacy mattered more than the waiting room, because a clinic without medication is just a nice waiting room and nothing else. "Why have you not done this yourself?" Ryan asked at some point, the formal tone dropping without either of them planning it. "Because I am a paramedic, not a millionaire," said Julia. "I have the knowledge. You have the resources. That is why this could actually work as a real partnership." "Partnership," Ryan repeated. "I like that word. Don't get ideas, Slade. This is work." "And if I wanted it to be more than work?" Julia looked up from the tablet, her eyes shut like a door closing. "Then you would be wasting your time." "Why, because I know men like you," she said. "You are bored. I don't look like the women you usually go out with, and that holds your attention right now. But one day the novelty is going to wear off, and you are going to move on." "That is not fair," said Ryan. "You don't know me." "Then tell me I am wrong," she challenged. Ryan opened his mouth and closed it again, because she was not wrong. That was exactly his pattern. Year after year, woman after woman. "I want to be wrong about you," said Julia, quietly gathering her tablet. "Prove to me that I am wrong." And she left him sitting there with those words turning over and over in his head. That night, Ryan could not sleep. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his apartment, looking out at the lights of the city all the way to where Lake Michigan disappeared into the dark horizon, thinking about who he was. About the man he had become without noticing. He had spent years building walls, going out with beautiful and unchallenging women who would never contradict him, who would never make him uncomfortable. Julia made him uncomfortable. Julia held a mirror up in front of him and made him look, and not everything he saw was something he liked. So here is a question for you. What would you have done if you were in Ryan's place? Tell us down in the comments. The following morning, Ryan did something he had never done in his life. He set an early alarm on a Saturday. Julia had mentioned in passing that she ran the free clinic on Saturdays, and he had quietly written down the address without telling her. He drove 40 minutes south through the city, and as he went, Chicago changed faces outside the windshield. The glass towers stayed behind. Neighborhood markets appeared hand-painted signs on storefronts, power lines crossing overhead, dogs sleeping on front stoops, rooftop water towers lined up against the winter sky. Ryan had lived 38 years in this city and had never driven down these streets. The church hall was a large room with a concrete floor and old box fans, and the waiting area was full to the door. There were families with young children, elderly women with their shopping bags, men still in their work clothes, people who clearly had nowhere else to go. Julia was behind a table taking in patients. She looked up and saw him standing in the entrance in his expensive shirt and clean shoes. Her eyes went wide. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "You told me to prove you wrong," Ryan answered. "So here I am. Put me to work." Julia studied him for a long moment, as if measuring the sincerity behind his eyes. Then she put a clipboard in his hands. Patient intake. Name, age, reason for the visit, whether they have insurance. "Think you can handle it?" "I built a company from nothing," said Ryan. "I think I can manage a clipboard." "We will see," she said. It was the hardest day of work Ryan had done in years. Not because of the physical effort, but because of what settled on him slowly, one story at a time, hour by hour. He met a mother with 3 small children who had been cutting her blood pressure pills in half for 2 months to make them last longer, because the community health center had run out of her medication, and the pharmacy charged what a week of groceries cost. He met a man in his early 70s who had been skipping his heart medication on alternating days so he could keep paying his electric bill. He met a 16-year-old with a broken arm from the previous Thursday who had not gone to the emergency room because his mother was self-employed, had no insurance, and the clinic nearest to them had no X-ray equipment. The boy had gone 3 days with the bone out of alignment before asking for help. Ryan wrote the boy's name on the intake form, and his hand trembled while he did it. These were no longer statistics in a report. These were people with names, with families, with entire lives built around enduring quietly. And in 38 years, he had never once stopped to think about a single one of them. Julia had been watching him all day. He could feel her eyes from across the room every now and then. She was measuring him, waiting for the moment he got tired and left. He did leave. He stayed 14 hours until the last patient had been seen, until they turned off the fans and padlocked the door. "You did well today," said Julia when they stepped outside. She sounded genuinely surprised. "I didn't do anything," said Ryan. "You all did the real work." "You came," she said. "That is already more than most people ever do." They walked together toward his car through the cool night air, with the smell of food drifting over from a corner vendor. "Can I buy you dinner?" Ryan asked. "Why?" "Because you have been on your feet for 14 hours and you need to eat. And because I would like to keep talking with you." Julia hesitated. "Just dinner," said Ryan, "as partners on this project." "Fine," she said, "but somewhere simple. I am not in the mood for tablecloths tonight." They ended up at a corner diner on the avenue, with plastic chairs, a television turned to the evening news, and a woman working behind the counter. Ryan could not remember the last time he had eaten somewhere like that. Julia looked different there, more at ease, like someone had finally given her back her own body. She ordered chicken soup and a beef sandwich. Ryan ordered the same. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "The real you, not the paramedic, not the project consultant, just Julia." "What good does that do you?" she asked. "Because I want to know." Julia studied him for a moment. Then she began to talk. She told him about growing up in Pullman, the streets with more potholes than pavement, the neighbors who looked out for each other because no one else was going to. She told him about her mother, Elena, who left at 9 in the evening to clean downtown offices and came back at 5 in the morning to make breakfast before the kids woke up for school. She told him about her 2 younger brothers who used to follow her everywhere and who still called her every single Sunday. She told him about the exact day she knew what she was going to do with her life. She was 8 years old when her grandfather collapsed in the kitchen, grabbing his arm. They called and called. The ambulance took an hour and 20 minutes to reach their block because there was a detour around a construction site and the dispatcher could not find the right route. Her grandfather died on the kitchen floor with the whole family standing around him watching the clock. "That day, I decided," said Julia quietly, "that no one else was going to die waiting while I was there." Ryan felt something open up in his chest. "That is why the clinic means everything to you." "It is not a project for me," she said. "It is my neighborhood. It is my people. It is my grandfather on that floor." "I understand now," said Ryan. And it was true. For the first time, he truly understood it. "Your turn," said Julia. "Tell me about yourself." Ryan hesitated. He never talked about his past with anyone, but something in the way she looked at him made him want to try. "I grew up on the North Shore," he said. "Old money family, private school, country club, summers abroad. The whole picture." "Sounds nice," she said. "It was very lonely," Ryan admitted. "My parents were always working or traveling. I hardly ever saw them. The housekeepers and the drivers raised me more than my parents did. The truth is, in many ways, I raised myself." He stopped for a moment because he had just heard himself say that, and he had just understood what it meant. The women who had raised him were exactly the ones he had mocked at that bar. "Is that why you never let anyone really get close to you?" Julia asked. The question landed harder than he expected. "Maybe," he said. "That is sad," she said. But she did not say it with pity, she said it with honesty, which is different. "Yeah," said Ryan. "It is." They sat in silence for a while, and it was the comfortable kind. The kind that does not make anyone want to fill it. "I like this," he said. "What?" "Talking with you. Actually saying the truth. I do not normally do this. You should said Julia. When Ryan got back to his apartment that night, there was a message from Nick waiting on his phone. "How is the bet going?" Ryan looked at the screen for a long time with the city lit up behind the glass. He had forgotten about the bet. He had completely forgotten about it for weeks at a time, and that scared him more than he was willing to admit. The weeks that followed slipped through Ryan's hands like water. He and Julia kept meeting to organize the gala, but very quickly it stopped being only about the gala. They met for breakfast before her shift. They texted back and forth at 2 in the morning. They talked about everything. Politics, music, the city, their childhoods, what they had wanted from life when they were young. Ryan started looking forward to those hours more than anything else in his week. And other things were shifting too. He began reading about inequality and healthcare access, about how many Americans work their whole lives without any insurance. He read about the advantages he had always had that he had never once noticed, precisely because they had always been there. It was uncomfortable. Sometimes he ended up frustrated with himself, closing his laptop hard, but he kept reading. One afternoon, Julia mentioned an author she had loved since high school, a poet she had first discovered in an English class. The next day, Ryan showed up with every one of her books ordered from a local bookstore. "You did not have to do that," said Julia, but she was smiling. "I wanted to," said Ryan. "I want to understand the things that matter to you." "Why?" asked Julia. The question hung between them. Ryan knew what he wanted to say. He was afraid to say it. "Because you matter to me," he said, finally. The smile faded slowly from Julia's face. "Ryan, I already know what you were going to say. That you are not my type, that this won't work. But Julia, I have never felt like this before. You make me want to be a better person. You push back. You see through all of my pretending." "This is not a good idea," she said, but her voice was soft and uncertain. "Why not?" "Because we are too different." "What if you are wrong?" asked Ryan. "What if I am right?" she answered. But Ryan could see it in her eyes. She felt it too. This thing between them that had not asked either one of them for permission. "Give us a chance," he said. "Just one." Julia looked away toward the window. "I need to think about it," she said. And she left him there with those words circling in his head, feeling like he had jumped off a building and did not yet know whether he was going to fly or hit the ground. What Ryan did not know was that in those same days, Julia was fighting a far worse battle of her own, because she had not told him the full truth. Nick had come to find her a few days after that poker game almost 3 months ago, back when she did not even know Ryan Slade existed. He had shown up at the Saturday clinic, waited until she had seen the last patient, and repeated word for word what his partner had said that night at the bar. "I would never fall for a service worker. A woman in a uniform, no degree, no last name that opens any doors." Julia went cold. Then a deep, old anger rose in her. The kind of anger a person carries since childhood, from every time someone had looked past them at a counter or in a waiting room. She had never met this man in her life, and yet his words went straight to the bone, because they were the same words her mother had been handed in 1,000 different ways. Nick laid out his plan right there. Get Ryan to fall in love, then let him experience in public what it feels like to be dismissed. Make him understand the cost of judging a person before you know them. And he offered $500,000 for the clinic fund if she agreed to take part. Julia said yes. Not for the money, and she was very clear about that within herself. She said yes because she wanted that man to understand the size of his mistake. She expected to despise him. She expected to find someone hollow and self-satisfied, the kind of wealthy man she sometimes treated in the private ER, who looked through her like she was a piece of furniture. And at first that was exactly what she found. But then the man started to change. He listened to her. He genuinely listened. He showed up at the Saturday clinic unannounced and stayed 14 hours. He was kind to the patients, he learned their names, he asked real questions and cared about the answers. And somewhere along the way, Julia stopped pretending. Real feelings had grown in her feelings. She had not wanted feelings that frightened her, because she knew the truth perfectly. Everything they had was standing on top of a lie. And sooner or later he was going to find out. Julia told Pearl, her nurse friend at the hospital, the only person in the world who knew about Nick's plan. They were sitting with coffee in Pearl's apartment kitchen on a Sunday morning, laundry hanging out on the back porch, the television on with no volume. "You have to tell him," said Pearl. "I know," said Julia. "The longer you wait, the worse it is going to get." "And if he hates me?" Julia asked. "And if he understands?" said Pearl. "Would you understand if someone you cared about had been lying to you from the very beginning?" Pearl let out a slow breath. "Probably not." "There it is." "But Julia, you did not know you were going to fall in love with him." "Nobody planned that." "It doesn't change anything," said Julia. "I lied just the same." "Then fix it. Tell him before someone else does." Julia knew Pearl was right. But fear is a very patient animal. One more day, she told herself. One more week, just a little more time to hold on to this thing I am about to lose. That waiting was going to cost her absolutely everything. The fundraising gala was set for a Friday evening in November at the Grand Sterling Hotel in Chicago. Julia argued with Ryan 3 separate times about whether she was even going to attend. "I do not belong at galas," she told him. "I don't have anything to wear, and I don't know how to talk to those people." "I need you there," he said. "None of this exists without you." So she went. Pearl lent her the burgundy dress and did her hair in Pearl's apartment kitchen the afternoon of the event. "You tell him tonight," said Pearl, working the last of her curls into place. "Tonight," Julia promised. She arrived at the hotel feeling like she was wearing a costume. The ballroom was full of people talking about investment returns and vacation properties, waiters circling between the tables, a string quartet playing in the far corner. Julia stayed near the balcony door, counting the minutes, rehearsing in her head the sentence that was going to destroy the most beautiful thing that had happened to her in years. Ryan stepped up to the podium in his suit. He looked nervous. Public speaking had never been his natural terrain, but tonight it mattered to him. "Thank you all for being here," he said. 3 months ago, I thought helping meant writing a check, showing up to a dinner, taking a photo, and feeling like a good person for the rest of the year. Warm laughter from the crowd. Then I met Julia Torres. Every head in the room turned toward her. Julia felt the heat rise in her face. Julia taught me that real change needs more than money. It needs understanding. It needs commitment. It needs seeing people as people and not as numbers in a report. Ryan's eyes found her across the room. She demanded better from me, and every day since then I have been trying to deserve it. The room applauded. Tonight, I am announcing that my company will be donating $2 million to build a free clinic in South Chicago in Pullman. A murmur of surprise moved through the crowd. And beyond that, we will be covering the staff salaries and medication costs year after year. This is not one night. This is a commitment. More applause. And I want to give this clinic a name. It will be called the Elena Torres Clinic, in honor of Julia's mother, who cleaned downtown offices through the night and sold homemade tamales at the neighborhood market every morning so that her 3 children could have something more. Julia's breath stopped. She had not known he was going to do that. The tears came before she could stop them. Ryan stepped down from the podium and crossed the ballroom to where she was standing. "Julia," he said quietly, "can we talk somewhere private?" She nodded because she did not trust her own voice. They slipped out to the balcony. Below them, Lakeshore Drive stretched out with its long lines of red and white light, and beyond it, the dark expanse of Lake Michigan disappeared into the night. "You named it after my mother," said Julia. "She earned it," said Ryan. "You told me everything she gave up for your family. I want her name on a wall where people will read it. Ryan, I already told you what I said before. That I matter to you. It is more than that, Julia. I am falling in love with you. These months with you have been the best of my life." Julia felt her chest break open because she knew exactly what had to happen now. "Ryan, there is something I need to tell you." "How lovely," said a voice behind them. They both turned. Cecilia Chandler was standing in the balcony doorway, in her silver dress, her face tight with cold fury. "Cecilia?" said Ryan. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," she answered flatly. "Though I am surprised you didn't tell me you had moved on. With her, no less." "Cecilia, don't—" But Cecilia had already turned back toward the ballroom. Ryan and Julia followed. Cecilia took the microphone from the stand with a calmness that was deeply unsettling and smiled out at the tables. "I am sorry to interrupt the party," she said. "But before you keep applauding, I think everyone here deserves to know that this love story is not real." The room went silent. "What are you talking about, Cecilia?" Ryan demanded. "I am talking about the bet," she said. "The one you made with your partner in a bar 3 months ago? The one where you said you would never fall in love with a woman who works a service job? Does that ring a bell?" A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Ryan's eyes went wide. He turned to Julia. "What is she talking about?" Julia could not speak. "Oh, she didn't tell you," Cecilia continued with a sweetness that was all theater. "Nick came to her 3 months ago. He told her exactly what you said. He asked her to make you fall in love with her and then humiliate you in public, and he offered her money for her little clinic if she played along." 200 people turned to look at Julia all at once. "Is it true?" asked Ryan. His voice was shaking. Julia felt the tears running down her face. "Ryan, let me explain." "Is it true?" he repeated louder this time. "Yes," she whispered. "At the beginning, but only at the beginning." Ryan went from pale to red. "So all of this, everything between us, it was a plan." "No, Ryan, I fell in love with you for real. I was going to tell you tonight. Tonight, he said. "When, after you watched me humiliate myself in front of all these people." Nick pushed through the crowd toward them. "Ryan, wait, let me explain." "You—" Ryan turned on his partner. "You set all of this up. You used her to get at me." "You said you would never fall for a woman like her," Nick said, not lowering his voice. "I wanted you to understand what you did not understand. And so you both lied to me." "We wanted you to see something," Nick started. "I don't want to hear it," said Ryan. He turned to Julia, and the pain in his eyes was hard to look at. "Did I ever actually matter to you, or was I just your project?" "Ryan, please," said Julia. "You matter to me. I love you." "Don't," he said. "Don't you dare say that word. You don't have the right to say that to me." And then Julia did something no one in that room expected. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and lifted her chin. "I lied to you for 3 months," she said, her voice cracked but steady. "And I am going to carry that for the rest of my life. But you bet money that you would never fall for a woman like me before you even knew my name. I lied after, Ryan. You started this." The entire room held its breath. Ryan stared at her for one long second, with his jaw tight and his eyes burning. "Not now," he said. Only those 2 words. He turned and walked out of the ballroom, and the crowd parted for him like water. Julia stood in the middle of everything, crying in a borrowed dress with 300 pairs of eyes on her. Nick reached her side. "Julia, I'm so sorry. I didn't know Cecilia had found out." She pulled her arm away from him. "You convinced me this was a good idea," she said. "And now I lost him." She walked out of the ballroom. Ryan was already gone. The 3 weeks that followed were the worst of Julia's life. She buried herself in work the way a person dives under water to block out all sound. 80 hours a week, double shifts, the overnight runs nobody else wanted, anything to avoid a single free moment to think. It did not help. The city had filled itself with him, everywhere she looked. The coffee shop where they had built the clinic plan together. The diner on the avenue where they had eaten chicken soup. Even the hospital entrance made her ache, because every time she passed through those doors, she remembered the man in the expensive shirt standing on the sidewalk that very first night, watching her work like he had never seen anyone actually do their job before. Pearl stayed close to her during breaks. "Give him time," she said. "He is never going to forgive me," said Julia. Why would he? She added quietly. I lied. Because people make mistakes, said Pearl. Because what you two had was real. Do you actually believe that it started with a lie? Pearl said carefully. But it became something else. I have seen you two together. You cannot manufacture that. Julia wanted to believe her. She could not quite get there. On the other side of the city, Ryan was falling apart in silence. He spent 5 days without leaving his apartment, his phone dark on the table, the clothes from the gala still on the bathroom floor. Then he went back to his old life. Bars, parties, bright and beautiful people, conversations that meant nothing. And everything tasted like plastic. Julia had changed him. He could not go back to the man he was before, and he could not move forward either, because every time he thought of her, the anger grabbed him again. That feeling of having been used, of having been made into a fool. Simon came to check on him. You look terrible, man, he said. Thank you, said Ryan flat. They were in the living room with the curtains closed at 4 in the afternoon. Have you talked to Nick yet? Simon asked. We have nothing to talk about. He is your business partner. He is your friend of 12 years. He lied to me. He wanted to teach you something by humiliating you. That is true. Simon paused. Can I ask you something? Fine. What you said that night at the bar about service workers, did you mean it? Ryan closed his eyes. I don't know. In the moment, I thought I did. That was rough, man. I know that already, said Ryan. Julia made me see that. She made me see a lot of things. So you changed, and now that counts for nothing? Everything was a lie. Everything? Simon pushed back. Because from where I was standing, that woman loved you for real. She lied to you. That is true, and it was wrong. But Ryan, you are not the victim of this story. Ryan looked up. Excuse me, you didn't just say something careless, said Simon, getting to his feet. You took a bet. You put a price on a woman you had never met like she was a hand of cards. You shook on it, laughing, dead certain it was going to be easy money. I was sitting right there at that table. I saw you do it. That is different. How is it different? Explain it to me. Ryan had no answer for that. She treated you like a game for 3 months, said Simon quietly. You treated her like a game before you even knew her name, and now you are in here feeling like the wronged party. Ryan stared at the floor because Simon was right, and he hated him for it. A few days later, his director Marcus came by. Marcus had been at the gala. I came to see how you were doing, he said. I am fine, Ryan lied. No, you are not, and that is allowed. They sat in the living room. Marcus had worked alongside him for 7 years. I will tell you one thing, said Marcus. In all that time I have known you, I have never seen you the way you were with Julia Torres. You were happy. Actually happy, not performing it for the room. It was not real. Are you sure? Because I watched the two of you together that entire evening. The way she looked at you, the way you looked at her, that is not something a person acts out. Do you love her? Ryan went quiet. Because if you don't, then you walk away, clean and simple. But if you do, then you are going to have to decide what weighs more, your pride or your happiness. When Marcus left, Ryan sat alone in the dark. Julia had lied to him. That was real. But she had also built something in him. She had made him want to become a different kind of man. He picked up his phone and checked the bank transfer. He had made it from his personal account, not the company account, because even in the center of all his anger, he had not been able to punish the people who needed that clinic. His phone rang. It was Nick. Ryan almost let it go to voicemail. Something made him pick up. What? He said. Forgive me, said Nick. I should have said that 3 weeks ago. What I did was wrong. Yeah, it was. I was angry. You are my friend and my partner, and you said something that cut me where it hurts the most. I know that now, said Ryan quietly. Do you? Nick let out a long breath. My mother cleaned houses on the North Shore for 18 years. In your neighborhood, Ryan. You ate dinner at her table. You held her when she was sick. And that night, with a drink in your hand, you said you would never look twice at a woman like her without even thinking about the fact that she existed. Ryan felt his throat close. I should not have pulled Julia into it, said Nick. That part is entirely on me, and I am sorry for it. Then why did you do it? Because I wanted you to see what I see. That love has nothing to do with job titles or what neighborhood someone grew up in. It is about finding the person who makes you better. I found her, said Ryan, and I lost her. Did you? Said Nick. Julia's working 80 hours a week, so she doesn't have time to think. She's been sleeping at the hospital. That is not what someone who was faking looks like. She lied from the very beginning, Nick. She did, and it was wrong, and she knows it. But you said you would never fall for someone like her before you had even met her, and then you bet $50,000 on it. What does that make you, Ryan? Ryan had no answer. The two of you bet on the same thing, said Nick. The difference is that you both fell in love and neither one of you planned on it. The question is what you are going to do about that. 4 months passed. The clinic was finished by the end of March, with its white tile floors, its 3 examination rooms, its waiting area with new ceiling fans, and a pharmacy with fully stocked shelves. Ryan had stayed involved in the project from beginning to end. Not for Julia, he kept telling himself that. He stayed because the work mattered, and that much at least he had learned well. He saw her once during those 4 months from a distance at a construction walkthrough. She was thinner and she looked tired, and she was still the most striking person on that entire building site. It took everything he had not to cross the room to speak to her. The opening was set for a Saturday morning in April. The whole neighborhood came out. Entire families with children weaving between the adults. Older women with their shopping bags, men still in their work boots from early shifts, people who had been waiting for something like this for years and had almost stopped believing it was ever going to come. Folding chairs lined the street, and a simple wooden platform stood beside the entrance. Above the door in blue letters on a white wall it read, Julia Torres Clinic. Ryan stood at the back of the crowd in a plain shirt with no name tag. He had not planned to speak. Then he saw Julia standing beside the platform holding the folder of event notes, looking completely lost. And he could not hold himself back. He started moving through the chairs. I need to say something, he said when he reached her. Julia looked up, startled. Their eyes met for the first time in 4 months. Ryan stepped up onto the platform and took the microphone. He took a breath. A few months ago, he said, and his voice carried down the whole street. I was sitting in a bar with a drink in my hand, and I said out loud that I would never fall in love with a woman who works a service job. The street went completely silent. I said it because I was ignorant. Because I grew up in a house where I never once learned the last names of the women who raised me. Because no one had ever made me stop and really look. He turned toward Julia. And then I did something even worse, and I have never said this to anyone out loud. I took a bet. I put a price on a woman I had never met as if she were a hand of cards. I shook on it, laughing, absolutely certain it was going to be easy money. Nobody made me do that. That was entirely my own choice. A murmur moved through the crowd. Then I found out that she had been asked to do the same, and I walked out of that room that night feeling like the injured party. It took me 4 months to understand that I was the one who started the game. Julia felt the tears begin before she could catch them. Then I met Julia Torres, Ryan continued, and he stepped toward her. And she did not just make me fall. She made me see. She held up a mirror to everything I was and did not want to look at. He stood directly in front of her now. It hurt that you lied to me. That pain was real, and it was mine. But I lied too, Julia. I lied to myself about who I was and what I believed for 38 years. You forced me to be honest, and for a while I resented you for it. Another tear rolled down her cheek. I do not resent you anymore. I cannot, because you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. The whole street was perfectly still. I am not asking you to forgive me today. I am not asking you to come back. I am only asking for a chance to show you that I learned something, that I grew, that I can be the man you deserve." Julia wiped her face with both hands. "You left," she said. Her voice came out soft, but it carried. "I know. You shut me out. You wouldn't listen." "I know. But I hurt you first," he said. "I need to own that part too." Julia looked at him for a long moment. "I lied to you," she said. "I should have told you the truth by that first Saturday. I don't have any excuse that." "Why didn't you?" Ryan asked gently. "Because at the beginning I was angry, and I wanted to teach you a lesson. But then I got to know you, the real you, and I fell in love with you. And I was terrified that if I told you the truth, you were going to disappear." "And I did," said Ryan. "Yes, and it broke me." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, for my part in all of it." They stood face to face with the whole neighborhood watching them. "So what do we do now?" Julia asked. "We start over," said Ryan. "Without the lies this time, without the games. Just the truth even when it hurts." "Do you think that is even possible after everything? I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to try, if you do." Julia looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she nodded. "I want to try too." The street came alive with applause. Pearl was cheering with both hands raised over her head. Nick was smiling from the sidewalk with red eyes. Even Marcus was clapping, and Marcus never clapped for anything. Julia cut the ribbon with a pair of scissors borrowed from the stationery shop on the corner, and the door of the clinic opened for the very first time. The first person to walk through was the mother with 3 children, the one who had been cutting her blood pressure pills in half for 2 months, so they would last longer. She came out 20 minutes later with a full bottle of medication in her bag and a sealed prescription in her hand, standing on the sidewalk crying without caring who saw. Julia hugged her right there in the street, in her inauguration dress with her name tag crooked. Ryan held the door open for the next person in line, and then the next, and then the one after that all morning long, without anyone there knowing who he was. Julia Torres had cleaned offices through the night for 18 years so that her 3 children could have something more. And that morning her name was written in blue letters on a white wall on the same street where she had once walked home in the early morning cold, carrying a pot of tamales. Julia looked up at the sign and stood there for a long moment. Ryan came and stood beside her without a word, without touching her just there. Everything was not yet resolved. There were many difficult conversations still ahead, and many days of rebuilding trust, piece by piece. But they were standing together at the door of something that was real, and that worked, and that was going to keep working long after both of them were gone. And for that day, that was enough. If this story moved you, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. May you always have someone in your life who loves you for exactly who you are.